Good afternoon, colleagues. Can you hear me well? Everything's fine? My name is Alexandra Arhangelsky. I'm going to be the moderator of this session, which is titled Economics and Culture, Economy and Culture Assessing the Effectiveness of Urban Cultural Programs. So just a couple of words from me before I say them. Let's have the rules of the game. So let's have a public agreement between us. Alexandra Auzan loves this thing. So I'm declining the judgmental attitude, and you decline the, this sticking to our agenda. So if you are running out of time, I will wave my hand and you will understand that you have to wrap up. So we are talking today about the thing which is key to various challenges, to country challenges and city challenges, and we can look at it in industrial, in sectoral, from sectoral point of view, social point of view, a system of social services, and for all of these aspects, we have a number of efficiency criteria, and that's what we are going to talk about today. What efficiency is in well, when applied to such challenges we are discussing today. So if we try and get closer to broader understanding of efficiency of culture within the framework of the city policy, I think it'll be the best result to achieve. We have four presenters, three members of participants of the discussion. We will try and make it short and have a Q&A session at the end. I'll be the moderator, a tough moderator of the session. So now I'm going to introduce the panelists. Sergei Kapkov, Minister of the Government of Moscow, Head of the Department of Culture, the City of Moscow. So working with Alexander Kapkov for quite a period now. We know him very well. Yes, welcome, Mr. Kapkov. Alexander Alexandrovich Auzan, Dean, the Economy Department, MSU. He deals not only with economic research, but also works with social and economic problems. In 2011, he headed a huge research on culture as factor of modernization. Well, maybe we will see some links with this topic in his today's presentation. Richard Su, H+ founder, Tanzi professor, and other very important universities of China. He has huge experience working in China, first of all in Shanghai and in New York, Paris, Luxembourg, and his presentation will be very interesting and important. Irina Dmitrievna Prokhorova, we all know her as director of the New Literature Overview publishing house. They deal with the research in literature and are quite a global institution. The founder of the Mikhail Prokhorov Foundation, lots of social programs in Krasnoyarsk, in Norilsk. Irina Dmitrievna, welcome. So, other participants of the discussion: Martin Berger, Erasmus Happiness Economics Research Organization, academic director. His subject is city economic environment and index of happiness. Economics of happiness and satisfaction is one of the criteria of urban economy. Soyoung Ro, Modern Art Center Seoul director, Kyunghae director, professor, Korea, Republic of Korea, deals with practical research and new media and their role in forming the urban environment. Vitaly Kurenoy, Culture Department, Humanitarian Faculty, the Higher School of Economics. So here are our participants. 12 minutes for presentations, and then a short question from me, if needed, and then we start the discussion. Sergei Alexandrovich, please, you're welcome. And if you have a presentation prepared, do we have a clicker? Presentation, yes, I do have a presentation. You know, if we speak about the criteria of efficiency of city projects in culture. I think our panel, our discussion, we limit ourselves, kind of, since for me, during recent previous 3 years, nothing has really changed, and we think that the Department of Culture of Moscow is the Department of City Ambiance, not about theaters and music schools and houses of culture, but the ambiance of the city, tactile feelings of life and the economy of happiness. Well, we can have our own notion of this, but anyway, speaking here in the Urban Forum, I'm deeply convinced that the culture and as a sector is a budget-creating thing for the city. Moscow is criticized by various economists, and they say Moscow doesn't produce anything, and officials say that Moscow doesn't create anything except for sense, political sense, cultural, national, social, educational, and all other things. So I think that the role of culture today in such a capital city as Moscow is underestimated. And I think we anyway will have a bright future, and we will change this attitude towards culture. Unfortunately, speaking about culture policy today means speaking about social policy, and that's the same for all culture capitals. Culture tackles social challenges, city ambience, creation of bright city identity, development of human capital, innovations. So one of the most important successes of the Department of Culture is that bright Moscow identity we wanted to create through public spaces, through parks, through just giving things to people, live, work, and create. That's the motto of Moscow. We try and involve into this process active part of our community. Now Moscow is part of the Forum on Culture among culture capitals. 28 cities representatives met in Amsterdam to speak about culture policy, and all sessions of the summit were about social problems and challenges of culture policy. And Moscow is not an exception here, but some specificities are here, and something that differentiates us from others. Next slide. The situation looks as follows. These are the open available data, public data. This is the budget for culture for 2014. So the city spends 4,267 billion rubles for libraries, and they earn 71 million rubles. I'm not going to say anything about this, but that's how the things stand today. Museums and exhibition halls of the city of Moscow get the investments financing 7,737 million, and they earn 1,682 million rubles. Schools of art. Well, I think we have the best schools of art, and musical and aesthetic education is the best in Moscow. And they get huge money for their activities, though off-budget services or other services cannot be provided by them to citizens, and they earn less than 10% from the money that are invested into their development. In fact, our institutions live in a Soviet or post-Soviet reality, though the city has changed a lot during the previous 2 decades, and these figures prove this point. And if we look at the next slide, the underfinancing of the program, The Culture of Moscow, starting 2012 up to 2018, I think it's one of the huge successes of the mayor's office under Sergei Sobyanin. Now we have the programs. The programs exist today where we can declare things, and we have KPIs for the programs, and we can say what we do and how, and we can be responsible for the money which is invested into the program. And if we look at Moscow, then we can see that today's budget totals to 80 billion rubles. The budget of the city of Moscow, and that budget also includes the federal budget money and money funds from from individuals and companies. And our theaters, exhibition halls, and museums, they do various commercial activities and can earn something. And spendings grew during the recent years, spendings on culture, and I don't think that they will decrease. I think that that culture is in demand among the citizens and politicians, and it's quite interesting subject. Off-budget earnings and how it grew. And what our success is. The Department of Culture Moscow official data says that starting 2011 and this year, we looked at the top line, we increased off-budget earnings 3.5 times. So 2011, 3.53 billion rubles, and now it is 11 billion rubles, the income of the culture sector. You know, it's our efforts, our promotion of culture, and another form of communicating to citizens. We say that culture is interesting, it is in demand, and it is fine to pay for culture. And I will get back to this figure again. We will have another piece of interesting statistics a bit later. Our culture institutions know how to earn money. They have to continue working in the conditions we have today. Well, it's, let's put it like this, economic instability. That's what we face today, and we have to earn not only on tickets or making the services more expensive. Our institutions should know how to earn on the audience they have, providing additional services to them. So if we speak about our statistics, you know, our museums split their audiences on 4 groups: disabled, veterans, pensioners, and the youngsters. If we take the Manchester Museum, for instance, they have 124 groups of audience, and they know how to target which group. And our goal is to make the system more balanced and become closer to international standards of perception of culture. And you know that we banned this discrimination price for foreigners in our museums, and now we have 1 day in a month of attending museums free of charge, and now the museums work up to 9 p.m. And the goal is not to just earn on ticket prices. We do not want the prices to be high. We want the culture to be available, but we also want to earn on additional services. We have a huge potential in this. Looking at the leaders in terms of off-budget earnings in the city of Moscow, theaters are the leaders here. Moscow spends 12.7 billion. Two new screenplays for each theaters, and they earn 5.795 billion rubles. So looking at parks, what we see: state assignment for cleaning and security, and new loans, 2,300,000. So the budget is 1,328 million. So per 1 ruble of budget, our parks earn 67 kopecks. And parks like Sokolnik or Park Gorkova, they sometimes earn 3 rubles per 1 ruble invested by the state, by the city. You know, 3 years ago, Sergei Sobyanin, the mayor, decided to cancel to cancel tickets to enter for entering parks. Now they just earn money on the audience, on the people that visit the parks, and offer additional services. So picking into the future, we would like to stop this management of institutions. We would like to do the financial management for institutions, the management of the funds that are being allocated. We start a grant program under the Department of Culture. We will have 3 territorial projects and 3 sectoral competitions. 32 billion plus 32 billion, and that's just for the start. We want private and federal and city institutions to take part in these competitions, and we want them to create interesting cultural product irrespective of the form of financing. If we look at the statistics, which is changing quite interestingly, where Muscovites go, 75% of the city the Muscovites go to parks, 21 million people during the year. And surprisingly enough, in winter, there are more people visiting parks than in summer. 72% visit ice rinks. They just want to feel the winter and they go to parks. 62% go to cinemas, 53% theaters, 45% exhibition halls, and libraries and concert organizations, 40 and 36 respectively, and 6% houses of culture. We have to learn how to use consumption attitude towards culture. It's not an offending thing. It's not a bad thing. People have various preferences in terms of culture. It depends on their level of education and all other things. When a huge TV project starts, a project devoted to success, about the success of a person who never knew how to sing and now he or she is a singer, lots of people after watching this go to houses of culture and start learning how to sing. And in the majority of cases, our houses of culture cannot provide such service, but it doesn't mean that it is not in demand. Well, private businesses provide such services, and also education institutions provide such things. 2,000 rubles per hour, and you will learn how to sing, how to dance, and lots of other things. But so people need this. And if we look at the next slide, then spendings on culture in the budget of Russian households up to 2012 total to 3 or 2%. Now we declare, unfortunately, we didn't include into the presentation, but we can show it by the results of our research. 7% of a Moscow household, of a Moscow family, is the sum to be spent on culture and leisure, and they include cinemas and going to cafes or restaurants or another cultural venue. And another important thing, Moscow family is only prepared to spend 2% of the budget for education, and it's a completely different story comparing to the Western countries or the United States. At that countries, they do different things. They spend a lot on education to, have an additional line in his or her CV and get better results in the future in terms of career. And we have a huge potential to be uncovered. Our large institutions and public spaces is a good criteria for us now. Small businesses and entrepreneurship activities, which are on in these venues, libraries or houses of culture. We do not have to do everything on our own as we previously did. We want private individuals, private initiative to enter our spaces. During previous session, someone said that parks are now the territory of democracy. Businesses feel very comfortable out there, and at the same time, the society and the framework we have within the territory enable people to feel comfortable and free, and they feel that there is something unusual for us. Being at that place. That's what I meant when I spoke about Moscow identity. And that's why it is so important for us to develop bookstores, cafes, and creative spaces within the city limits. And we also assess the managers, leaders of various institutions, and we look at what successes they achieved. Even if we look at the parks as public spaces, in the wages of employees of such institutions, well, the average salary is 17,000 rubles, but now it's 50,000 rubles. And parks, as large companies, they now earn for themselves, and they know now how to properly utilize the city spaces. As of today, we can see that culture institutions, for instance, one type of institutions can play various roles depending on the place they are located. Some libraries are not just storages for books. They are now perceived as Moscow City sitting rooms. People come and listen to lectures and engage in the social life of the neighborhood. We think it is very important. We develop various programs and projects. We combine libraries and such centers. We want to promote reading and development of our activities around the Russian language. This project has a huge potential for this city like Moscow, with millions of school kids and students. Of course, it is not possible to every time assess the financial results. It is important to develop social capital and create a space in such large megapolis as Moscow. We want to eliminate the limits. In the Gorky Park, people come and dance salsa irrespective of their income. Large entrepreneurs, businessmen, they also go there and just to feel the life. And our goal is to decentralize things. So our goal for this year and for next year is decentralization, 3D culture, Commonwealth, decentralization, and children. Well, and youth. That's what we're interested in. We try to involve people. We try to entertain them. Those who come to Moscow, Muscovites, and also migrants, not only from the CIS countries, but also those who work here and live here in Moscow. We want to involve them all. So, wrapping up my presentation, I'd like to say that for us, Moscow is the city of meanings. Live, work, and create. That's our motto. We can feel the real life here. You can be in demand here. You just make an effort and everything will be fine. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sergei Alexandrovich. Before we give the floor to Alexander Alexandrovich, a short question from me. Okay, it's obvious that Moscow, in terms of its scale and the square, it's a couple of cities in one. And the city center, and other neighborhoods, they are different. And assessment of efficiency applied to central culture institutions are not always efficient for the neighborhoods. You open libraries in Marina, for instance, or somewhere in the Leninsky Avenue. It's a completely different story compared against libraries in the city center. Do you have different assessment criteria for such things? No. The logic is that sometimes you do not know where it's going to be in the most demand. A city center library where you have all other institutions around, or in a distant neighborhood. Flats also are quite expensive there, and competition might be even tougher. So the single standard is important, and the parks that are done in remote neighborhoods, they are also very important, and they are done on very high quality of materials, and also we finance them on similar grounds, the central parks or all other parks. Decentralization, that's what's important. So you do not have to go to the city center to give cultural education to your children.
So what we want to do is to have a universal criteria. So social is more important than financial. Yes, Alexander, you're welcome. Well, I will start with an unpleasant statement that I agree with Mr. Kapkov. There will be no discussion, though I am aligned in one point here. I'm not one of the economists who think that production means something made of iron. I think that human resource, human capital, and cultural capital is a product of Moscow in global labor split. It's a positioning of our city for the future. But on the other hand, when you quote numbers, Sergei, comparing it with Europe as to how much they're ready to spend for culture and for education, then here there's some trick, because well, but you said it was an unpleasant statement. Well, there will be no discussion. There will be a discussion. Yes, so there's a culture as a factor, because Russians believe that education and the value is the value of the national level the government should pay for. And as for his ticket to a cinema, he thinks it's quite okay to pay himself. So the monetary assessments or the cash assessments reflect the peculiarities of cultural approach. And I belong to economists who are dealing not with economics of culture, but with culture of economics, as to how it impacts further development. And the way I would like to outline it today, well, I am not going to argue in principle with the previous statement and presentation, but I would like to be bold enough to start with the general Lotman understanding of culture. I cannot see what's on the screen, but well, of course, I know what it is about. I'll try to do it. So to go the whole way from Lotman notion of and the creation of values together with all the mechanism, down to some specific observations as to how it can impact the assessment of efficiency of culture as an industry. And reacting to Mr. Arkhangelsky's statement, indeed, that approach was developed back in 2011 in the course of a big project, where not only economists were involved, Anton Zolotov, Alexandra Stavitska, but also Alexander Arkhangelsky himself was involved, Pavel Lungin, and it was sort of interdisciplinary thinking that allowed us to come down to the conclusions that I still preach. Well, I am not referring to such great people as Arkhangelsky and Lungin, but to my younger colleagues who were involved in other projects. And there are people present here that are on the slide. In last semester at the economic faculty of the university, were all involved in the survey. So let's go this way. Let's start with these two approaches. So the approaches are similar, though they are different, because the two pictures that you can see here, they show that they talk about one and the same thing, because museum, from the point of view of culture as an industry, is something that can bring some money and then spend some money. But the museum, from the point of view of pioneers in the Lenin Museum, well, it's something that provides some sense, whether you like it or dislike it. So the same museum. The number of facilities, well, of course, it's a bigger one, but here, that's an opportunity to bring them together, those two approaches. Culture, in a wider sense of the word, is not a baby or a product of economy or financing. Those are the factors that can break, or torpedo, block the economy, or develop it. What is the way it's done? Well, it's all clear. It is done through, for instance, specialization, because yes, indeed, the phenomena of the left-handed, for instance, that we can compete, creating an atomic hydrogen bomb, hydro turbine, and spaceship, but cannot do the same as a television set or a car. It's a cultural peculiarity of the country and not technical. It's a certain specialization that allows us to act in industries of service, culture, and science. We can provide brains of IT people, biologists, medical people, sports, art, but there are professions that we are worse at, and we import them from abroad. So culture forms the specialization and our role in the global productivity, restricting us on the one hand, but helping us on the other. On the one hand, culture can block development, for instance, not allowing us to be engaged in innovation development, what I called it Russian trick, or it's fear of risk, high distance to the authority, and high conflicting individualism. For instance, I cannot do or I do not want to do anything, and I'm afraid of doing anything. Well, different reflections in global worlds of mathematics and poetry can be, but the innovative innovation centers cannot operate like that. But there are other characteristics that move economics forward even under current cultural conditions. In 2015 and 16, I'm sure we will be witnessing great projects. My attitude is complicated. Some are very bright, some are outstanding, some might even be successful. Something in the Arctic, maybe in the space, construction, huge hubs of something. But I would like to say that such a well-known quality as the readiness to mobilize work would facilitate and creativity and work without standards. Well, this can sometimes be used for development, but I think that but for longer-term development, we need other characteristics, different characteristics. And that's why the culture might have some specific objective to support the characteristics the country has in its movement for achievement and develop those that are not in the condition, that are operating as constraints. And that's possible, as we can globally see. Well, culture is not only an opportunity, but a problem. Well, there are some researchers of sociocultural diversity, and Shlomo Weber, a great scientist, is in head of the laboratory on the impact of at our economic faculty, and he's a laureate of Humboldt Prize, and well, he was Michael Weber, and he is a professor of Canada, USA, and Israel. So about the cultural diversity, well, humanitarians usually speak about that, but we economists are half humanitarians. We think that we can review it or regard it as such and look at how it's going to impact. And thanks to social metrics that we can assess those prerequisites, we can calculate the cultural distances from the migrant sources of diversity, of cultural diversity in a city. And those distances, well, generally speaking, tell us what to do, not only in the migration policy, because we need different migration policies depending on different groups, but also in cultural policies, because we have different distances and different capabilities of interaction and surprise each other. So actually, that means that there's a factor, and Sergei mentioned it. Well, it's pleasant to hear this term from the mouth of a Minister of Culture, social capital. Social capital, seemingly, according to our joint survey of older and younger generations at our economy faculty, is a trigger that switches on to the positive, which economically it means gross product, economic success of Moscow, or into a minus. With a high accumulation of confidence, this diversity giving you a plus, a positive, because this is an opportunity to create some complexes or different interesting things. But with lower confidence, it gives you a minus. That's why the objective of the cultural policy, the way we view it, the bizarre economists. So we have to facilitate accumulation of social confidence, and it's great that the Moscow authorities understand it quite well. Let's get over to the goal setting. So according to the survey of our colleagues, that's the picture reflecting time. I mean, our colleagues from the Institute of Sociocultural Research. That's how Muscovites' time looks. 49% of the Muscovites' time, well, is spent at home. And only the rest of his time is spent for some other forms of leisure. Is it good or bad? Well, you know what, from the point of view of the objective we set, confidence accumulation, it's bad because at home, he's beyond the cultural space. He has his TV set and internet. Like in anarchic internet and non-anarchic television, he's under a certain pressure of values, but generally speaking, in any case, he's not interacting with people. I would say that the advantage of a library or a theater, the theater he can see live, unlike the TV performance. He doesn't have any communication, socializing, or joint emotions, which would form up his confidence, accumulating his social capital. So the objective is to shift this border, not to kill internet or television, but to redistribute those capabilities for people, and thus you should understand what kind of barriers or borders there are, because well, down from motivation, don't want, difficult, afraid, and transport barriers, because you have to spend time in traffic and money for traffic, and the most difficult, I want something but not this. I look at an internet, but it's not what I would like to see in a cinema, theater, concert hall, or wherever. Working with the barriers, you can come up to some result. Only two examples to quote here. Well, it's our amateurish analysis. Of course, we should do some more serious surveys. But as for theater, yes, I would agree that here there is a barrier because of the price of the ticket. Well, I think it's maybe we should use some electronic exchange. Maybe you do it this way already, Sergey. And in a theater, it's not an issue of the top theaters. Everybody knows what. But what's on? We should have a navigation system to reduce the expenses of thematics and assessments of different theaters or libraries. Well, people don't want to go to a library, but you have upgrade his motivation. He will, well, if, for instance, there are some other opportunities neighboring, for instance, a club or a cinema to buy a book, then his motivation will be, and his desire to overcome the barriers will be upgraded. So from the point of view of those approaches, we can reach our goals. In conclusion, I would like to say that all cultural processes are slow. As well as educational, because human capital realistically starts to be seen only in 5 to 7 or even 10 to 15 years. Well, investments into culture also takes similar times. Very difficult to convince the government, especially the Ministry of Finance. But I like a proverb which says, those who want to get everything and right away gets nothing and gradually. Thank you. Thank you very much, Alexander. A short question. Do you really believe that culture forms confidence and trust in society and not some other institutions are engaged? Well, let's say as follows. Let's put it this way. Depending on your understanding of culture, in a wider sense of understanding of this word, when forming any values and behavioral sets belonging to culture, and Lotman notion about the sense, I think it's just a different side of it. But the other thing is what kind of organizations and institutions are doing the thing. Well, yes, I should say that besides libraries, museums, and other things, besides family and church, there are three very effective institutions: school, prison, and army. Well, different types of modernization and politics, they use different sets of all those three instruments. My position is that bad university is better than good army or a good prison. The issues of trust and forming values, well, it depends on a lot of organizations and institutions, institutions or facilities. But if it's an issue of culture, yes, if it's a question of culture, yes, social capital is just a shell, but the trust is a value and cultural phenomenon. Thank you. Thank you, Alexandra. So you like the fact that the Minister of Culture used this social capital term? Well, and I liked the phrase that they didn't produce anything but sense. So now you're welcome. The technologies you are engaged in, they are applied in Moscow and the regions, so you're welcome.
Great. I heard a lot since the last 2 days of different topics and panels. I want to also refer this to the bigger topic of drivers. My presentation today will be very much about China, where I come from. I'm glad there's nobody in this room for China to disagree with me. And I wonder how much of this presentation will be relevant to Russia and to other places. Also, please keep in mind what I'm presenting is not just limited to China. I have scanned and researched quite a bit globally to prepare this presentation. I'm going to go very quickly with the slides because of the limited time. We have 12 minutes. Please imagine my presentation as a bad video. I'm going to go through it very quickly as editing. Thank you for having me here. I'm going to first share a few slides from the founder of TED, Richard Saul Wurman. And he has been studying various different cities and what cities are becoming to understand before you do too much. Cities is going to be really the future of our globe because of the number of people living in it. I'm going to go through this reasonably quickly. I'm going to stop here for a while because I think so much of what we do is based on these three words: people, places, and ideas. Ideas means also projects. My topic will be really about what is the intersection of these three circles. And I'm going to argue that the intersection may be ecosystem. The ecosystem is really the coming together of different parties and very different parties. And more I see what's happening in different places, in different organizations, the more diverse the parties, the more exciting it gets. If too much of the same people is in the room, the conversation may have some boring factors. Ecosystem is also about linking the dots that we have collected. How do we link them? How do we value all the different pieces? Impact. I think when we talk about economy and culture, it is not far from the word art and business. I practiced art and business for 30 years. And a few years ago, I learned something very valuable. There's a third piece that could be in the middle of art and business. It is purpose. The purpose will help us, guide us with a bit more of impact. And the last piece is empathetic. Empathetic is not just culture for culture's sake, creativity for creative sake, but is there some people that we are addressing the topics? I'm glad that there's no Chinese brothers here to fight me. This is what China has, and China may need more of. And I think there may be some similarity to Russia. So China has hardware because China can build. They can build very fast, very, very fast, and very much. It has great following because people are learned to follow. Strong economy, at least for now. Hard knowledge, we know how to learn, but is hard knowledge same as using? The population, a very large number of people to use, the users. Education, we have good education, but do we have good enough learning? Optimism, this is one of the great things of China, it is positive. Ambition, and it also has a lot of places where there's absence or have not. On the opposite side, what China doesn't have is, on the knowledge side is, we heard just now, innovation. Knowledge doesn't equal innovation. Learning. Learning is what you want for yourself. Education is what the society and the country want you to have. Life, quality of life. Because I've lived outside of China, I can appreciate quality of life that many Chinese do not know what it is. Because this is in many ways still a very new country. Taste, good taste, strong taste. Food, air, quality. Balance. I think one of the most valuable words of our cities is the concept of balance. Balance is about having the right and the wrong, having old and the new. People. I think something so much missing in so much of our school, so much of our education is emotionality. Emotions in cities. Because so much is about index, figures, and judging a criteria. Humanism. And I cannot read the last word, trust. Because one of the topic that I was asked to talk about in this session was actually trust. And I think ecosystem is about trust. It's about how do you build the circle of trust. I promise I'm not going to speak much, so I'm going to go through pictures. I'm going to show 5 examples of ecosystems that I think is quite valuable. TEDx. We have in this room a few friends from TEDx Moscow, and I think she's speaking in the front now. Human City. This is a topic I'm going to explore today at 8 o'clock for longer time. I will have a 35 minutes presentation on that. Pan-Asia Network, Urban-Rural Bridge, and the concept of BRICS. TEDx. Many people know that this is about ideas worth sharing, ideas worth doing. I think if there's one thing that is very important here is the concept of lifelong learning. The learning doesn't stop when you finish school. 10,000 hours, the idea of expertise. Communities, building smaller communities. And last, change makers. Change makers, because it seems like so much the idea of TED is building the community of change makers. Because we all know that government, central government, cannot be responsible for everything in the country. So I'm showing you some images of TED and TEDx's around the world. It is something that has been built for 30 years, and the last 10 years have become much stronger than ever. It is really about people coming together in the middle of ideas, and how do we take ideas and function. This is TEDx in Shanghai. Because it is very much about knowledge-based economy. It's also the bonding of people together. Because again, ecosystem is about bonding. And if everybody in the audience, from government to the public, to educators, to social, to the handicapped, can learn from peoples with ideas. Some people call it a little bit the new religion. I'm showing here a couple of speakers from different parts of the world, and also from from Russia. I believe there are some people from the Bolshoi, there's a composer, there's a photographer here. So really the linking of these different factors. The next topic is human city. Empathetic, many people have heard of the study of empathetic city. Active citizenship. I think the active citizenship really makes a city more human. Balance, emotional, and the identity of the city. People that do things by hand. This is yarn making. Yarn bombing is graffiti with yarn. The concept of this is very simple. You don't knit for hate. Knitting is about love. If you knit for the city, you're leaving a little bit of love behind. This is Magda Sayegh. She is the creator of these projects. This is a project out of Hong Kong. Before this project existed 1 year ago, nobody knew where the creative industry is. This is where the coming together of the government, the real estate people, the industries, and put 100 apartments of creative industry in one place, including 6 apartments for people to live for free. This is one of the great city programs out of Milan. It's called Esterni. All the projects they do is public space. How do you make public space? How do you bring people together? How do you make it poetic? These are all the different projects of Esterni. These people have been working on it for about 17 years, since university times. Poetry, public space, parklets. These are very simple, basic global projects. This is the concept of weed, wild flowers, wild weed. Because why only plant flowers in the garden, in the park? Once you plant weed, the park becomes much more public, much more real, and much more manageable. This is a project out of Japan. It's called Common 246. One parking space has only the life of 2.5 years. So they put together 80 restaurants, little temporary shops all over this parking lot, and it became one of the most successful places for 2.5 years. Art Festival, small little town in Penang. One man created 150 programs every year. Half of the programs are free. One of the top mentorship program. Human City is about also private-public partnership. Why take the burden for the city government to have to pay all the bills of culture? This is Rolex. Every year they take one mentor and one young creative and change their lifetime. Projects for land art, Crystal and Jean-Marc. I'll just keep on going, sorry. Fruit markets, weekend markets, flea markets, to really create a sense of belonging, sense of community. Park, this is a public project for the government, the High Line of New York. This is also done of weed, not flowers. Schools, bamboo schools. This is called the Green School of Bali. And the entire school is built of bamboo. And the students, this is eco schools. And another private public partnerships. 10 brands in Italy, fashion brands. They came in and adopted 10 monuments in Rome, in Milan, because the government cannot take care of these monuments. So each brand will take care of one single monument. I'll keep on going quickly. Pan-Asian Network is an idea we started a few years ago. My very good partner is here, So Young. Thank you for joining. It's the idea of complementary neighbors. There's so many things we are similar in Asia. We have similarities and we have differences. Why don't we celebrate and learn from it? We can share our resources and we can create dream teams. collaborate, co-create. It is not about only Asia, it's about how Asia will converse with the rest of the world. We have now worked this last month, 15 Asian cities and 13 Western cities. And how do we come together and dialogue with the rest of the world? And this is the various different categories that we put together because we think the softening of the line to make all the different parties come closer together. Because can we take down the wall a little bit between the government, the public, the education, the social, the handicap? These are the 115 people we have invited and some of the innovations they came together and share. And together we can build hardware, we can build ideas of education, we can build schools, we can build media. And this is the place that we had the event on an island in Korea. So every year we will go to different places to do this project. Urban-rural bridge, I will go quickly. I think this is the true balance and the inclusiveness of city, secondary cities, and villages. This is the first NGO project in China. It's called Project Hope. This is the girl that went through the education. She graduated from university 20 years later. Some of the projects in villages, because ultimately, if you are an expert in what you do, the way to prove it is, can you make it happen in a village, not in a city? Finish. This is a project just out of nature and village. Designers working with absolute culture and nature in northern Thailand to create products of incredible beauty. Teachers and architects in China working in villages, building schools. JR, graffiti, the idea of working, and humor. The train moves around and different faces will be made because of the trains. In Africa, in Brazil. These are projects we do in China, in villages, with students from different universities coming together. Within one summer, we built a few projects in the villages with the village construction people. And the last one, 3 more slides. The way I look at markets, way I look at city is about minds and closets. China at this point is the best formula, open mind and empty closet. Open mind because they want to listen to your ideas, to your story. What do you want to tell them? Empty closet because they can shop, they can buy. The worst scenario are closed mind and full closet. And we are, I believe the BRICS economy, the BRICS countries, is about the new world economy. This is the new economy after the Anglo-Saxon economy. It's about co-learn, co-create. We share land, earth, and seas, and how do we work from it? These are pictures, Marsha, that we had in Brazil 1 month ago. And we had Africa, South Africa, India, Brazil, Russia, and China coming together for 1 week. And you can just imagine the possibilities, the endless possibilities of this open mind, empty closet scenario. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I'll ask a question after Irina's presentation. Irina Dmitrievna, please, the floor is yours. Culture as the driver of development for a city and a region. Colleagues, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me here today. After such important and insightful presentations, sometimes theoretical, I'll be more practical in my presentation. I'll describe the activities of the foundation of Mikhail Prokhorov. For 10 years, we've been supporting cultural initiatives in Russian regions. When in 2004, the foundation was opened in Rilsk, in the Krasnoyarsk region, and we said that the priority would be to support local initiatives. It was a very unusual thing. at the time, and even those who liked us said that you do something strange, and there were lots of people who were skeptical about our activities. But even without knowing about the developments, high-tech developments in urbanistics, we managed to find a very important point in social and cultural life of the country. And the goal of the fund is the decentralization of culture, is to try and create 10 cultural capital across the country, because we think that such large country in today's in modern world cannot concentrate the culture in one city, in just one city, and the super centralization is our constant tragedy. Lots of people are coming. Lots of people are coming to Moscow, and it is bad for other regions, and various cultural projects and initiatives cannot evolve properly. And our goal was to look at it from a different point of view, look at the culture from a different point of view. And the economy of happiness, yes, it's very important, and better level of trust and all other things, yes, those are important. And when we developed the concept of the program, it was important for us to look at culture as a leverage for economic development of a region, and elimination of stagnation and more development into stagnating regions. And we were convinced that no metalware can bring various parts of the country together. Just the culture can. And there are two main culture points in the country, Moscow and St. Petersburg. That's the general perception. And it's not quite clear what happens across other parts of Russia. And in such situation where the rest of the country is not on the culture map, that's what creates this gap in identity and so many political and social problems. And the foundation decided to start with the Krasnoyarsk region as the starting point, and we supported culture on various levels. We started with grassroots initiatives and large projects, and we tried to create a culture environment, a critical mass of intellectuals who are prepared to generate ideas on their own and stay in the regions they live and create projects there. I must say that for us, the approach to how we developed the programs was very important. It was very important for us, without knowing about the books devoted to urbanism. The main thing for us at the time was that to start colonizing the regions was not the right thing to do. As Alexander Etkind said in the Internal Colonization book, he said, well, look at your own people as colonized people. Well, it's the process where you instill various experiences into regions without understanding of the specificity of the region, and you have to, of course, consider the specificity of the region, social and political situation, the level of conservativeness of the people, and all other things. And because of such initial approach, lots of concepts cannot survive or become banal and naive. And before starting our activities, we made field trips, and we looked at the cities we worked for, Krasnoyarsk and Norilsk, and the region on all levels. What happens out there? How are people prepared for new things? What the growth points are? And sometimes people do not know about really important and interesting projects that exist in the regions. Well, they might not be ideal, and they might not be in line with the general perception. That's why they are ignored and neglected. And so after such research, we created a complicated, comprehensive program with various competitions and projects. So our understanding of the cultural capital as a place where people communicate, where ideas circulate, where various competing views exist. views on culture and projects. So a capital is a crossroads of various ideas and opinions, and we wanted to create such environment. Well, it can take quite long while I'm describing this, but I do not have enough time. That's why just a couple of cases. When we started working in Norilsk, the main problem out there was, first of all, high level of education of people. More than 50% of the population of the region had higher education. At the same time, the territory was so remote from other parts of the country. No good theater for 15 years, no improvement of qualification, nothing. And we had to change something. And our first serious project was the Festival of Modern Art. And we tried to modernize the cultural life of the region. In Krasnoyarsk, we do the book fair, which is aiming not only at bringing good books into the city, university city, they do not have good books, but create a cultural environment. And around such large projects, we also create various grants and competitions, and we focus on preparing intellectual people. And our grant competitions, so like School of Culture, Journalism, Academic Mobility, we give money to students and PhD students to go abroad to study and get to the libraries. We also give grants to libraries and teachers and various education centers. We also help libraries to upgrade their facilities and to become centers for remote education. We do grants, give grants to theaters for them to be able to invite various directors and make ambitious, risky things and create new screenplays. It's a lively project. We always reconsider it, revisit it. We always look at how the environment, where it goes, and what issues are tackled, what are not. So, honestly speaking, how we measure success? If we think that we work for eternity, it's a remote result, and our systemic work can give something in 20 or 30 years, and we won't be able to see it. We have to work now anyway. We do not wait for miracles to come. We just support initiatives locally, and we can see that results are quite positive. Yes, we can show you figures. More than 4,000 applications were supported in 10 years. 2 billion rubles spent, 400,000 books given to libraries of the region in order to, cover this gap, intellectual gap. So these figures are quite good on their own, but they do not show anything. For me, one of the main criteria is the feedback from citizens. I think they know better than me. They say that the ambiance of the city changed and the quality of cultural life changed thanks to our theater festivals and book fairs and support of various initiatives, for instance, the Museum of Modern Art and festivals of modern dance, a lot of other important initiatives. And the most important thing for me is the number of applications we process in our foundation. So when we started our activities in Norilsk 2 minutes ago, project applications, there were about 2% of them. All others were give us computers, give us things, just simple basic things. Of course, we said yes to all of them. We knew that people should start with something small. They just have to grow up to these project activities. And we conducted master classes, workshops, seminars, and we explained things, how technologies work, how to create a project, how to be responsible for it. And now I can say quite frankly, we just analyzed it in the foundation. Now the project applications are 80% of all applications that are submitted. It means that with our help and with the help of the local Krasnoyarsk authorities, of course, this work gives some fruits. And the last thing to say, in this case, this 10 years work in the region enabled us to also cooperate quite efficiently with the local authorities. I think it's one of the rare cases where this cooperation turned out to be quite successful. When we tried to learn something about the region and the cities, we consulted with people and we asked what the problems are in the local authorities related to local education. So we didn't want to replicate the functions of the local authorities, but we just wanted to help where the state cannot do anything, because you have to have very sophisticated instruments to change the situation, to improve it. So we've been in the region for 10 years, and now we think that we've developed a know-how, and it gives some fruits. It's not just we turned the city into a garden and things changed 100%, but anyway, we think that the systemic step-by-step work under the motto which was given to us by Saltykov-Shchedrin, the writer, education in Russia should be instilled very carefully without bloodshed. I think such position will give us more results, and long-term results, not just a huge, not just in a rush constructing modern art museums everywhere and just opening up institutions and various venues. No, underestimation of the creativity of the local community is our main mistake. And what we see in practice, that the society is very creative, they learn very fast, and they start thinking globally and act locally, and they can have a discussion on local identity and serious discussion on the specificity of the region. So it is the work of the society to formulate its own identity from grassroots. It's a grassroots movement, and on this foundation, I think that's the place to start this culture, to develop the cultural mythology. It should be articulated by the local people, and we just help them. Thank you very much, Irina. Yes, you're quite right. If you do not consider the community and its abilities, it'll look like Bilbao, where they have very nice buildings, but the project does not operate in the way it was expected to. We have 3 experts on the panel. I'll ask questions to them and then to you. The first question to Martin Berger. Is it possible that the city culture create pleasure, and how we can calculate the results?
Well, we of course all want to know, does culture create happiness? I first have to disappoint you a little bit. There has been very little research about this topic, so there needs much more to be done. However, we have some evidence that culture creates happiness. So, on average, if you would ask people, are you satisfied with the culture in your city? You will see that people who positively respond to this question are also, on average, happier. What we also see is that cities that have a lot of cultural amenities are on average also happier cities than cities that lack these cultural amenities. If you would, for example, look in Russia and compare Moscow and St. Petersburg to the rest of the country, then you would see that in Moscow and St. Petersburg, citizens score about 6 out of 10 on the happiness scale, while in the rest of Russia, this is about 5.5 out of 10. Of course, part of this differences is also caused by income differences within Russia, but a part might be attributed to the access to cultural amenities. Question is, how can these cultural amenities, how do they contribute to happiness in the end? In the first place, you can say, if you would look at consumption patterns, we know from a lot of studies that it's not material consumption that contributes to happiness, but it's actually experiential consumption that contributes to happiness. So it's not buying this luxury car or luxury house that brings happiness to people, but it are really things also like going to theater, going to holidays, etc. Then there is also another way in which happiness can contribute to, or culture can contribute to happiness, and we have heard this a lot in all presentations, and that is that culture can promote social capital. So culture offers meeting places to people, and this also promotes social connections and well-being, and in the end has social capital and trust. And as I said, this is based on only a few studies that have been done. But when we are going to, and in the institute we are really working on measuring happiness in cities, and we are now trying to also connect places in the cities to how actually people feel in these places, by asking them questions, but also by interviewing them.
Спасибо.
Thank you very much. Now I would request Soin Kro answer another question. So you work in an institution, well, inside the market space, but you are engaged in cultural and social. Well, is it compatible, those things? Can you, in relation to the cultural institutions, can you apply just market logics? For instance, if an ineffective closed, effective open, is there any disproportion? What do you think?
Okay. I've been engaged in both spheres. Mostly my art center could be considered as belonging to the cultural center, so-called. But what we've been doing is very closely related to the market. I've been doing it for about 20 years. Electronic art and tech is what I do. And I realized that in thinking about, because today's theme is about market and culture, and thinking about the relationship between the two, I think the relationship has changed from the 20th century to the 21st century. Up until the 20th century, which we call it industrial age, it was the market or economy that sort of drives the culture sector, at least in the capitalist societies. Simply put, if you have enough money, if you are well off enough, then you give, some extra to the cultural or artistic sector. Now, we talk about the relationship in a new light because of the rising creative sector, creative economy. But then, now I like to challenge further by asking, now in the 21st century, maybe it's not the economy that drives the culture, but vice versa. It's the culture that is driving, that is helping the economy. Many people would agree, but I like to go further by challenging, can you really trust the economy that you are helping to build, right? There is increasing doubts and questions about the future of capitalism. I know there are some economists here, but I don't think any economist can be confident about, what our economic system will be, where we see more and more increasing arena for collaboratism, open source, community, and economic jargon, decreasing returns to scale. Which is, increasing returns to scale. Decreasing returns to is really the basics of the capitalistic economy based on scarcity. So what should we do? By the way, another point I'd like to mention is, according to a UN forecast, in 20 years from now, about 65% of the jobs there is now, that you have now, will be gone. So we really don't know. I mean, there are young people here, but we don't really know what they will be doing when they're 40s and 50s, right? So I guess the best bet would be just, you know, as they say in a really common term, follow your heart. And that's what culture is about. And this is my first time in Russia. And Russia is a country of Tchaikovsky and Dostoevsky. And I really like to see your heart, where your heart is, the Russian people. And as Irina just mentioned, I think culture starts from identity, you know, who you think you are. And I think we should talk less about the numbers and economic, you know, contributions and all that, but more about the hearts and who we think we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, but we have to think about indicators and numbers in the coming year especially, but heart, yes, is very important. Vitaly Kurinoy, the floor is yours. Culturologists very often refuse talking about the pragmatic side of culture, as Sergei Kapkov said about, well, the way you expressed it, about consumerism interpretation of the notion of culture. Is it true? Well, are you for traditions? Well, I represent the Higher School of Economics, and it would be odd if I occupy the position of, well, far from economics. Well, but nevertheless, I would like to articulate two ideas, two thoughts as comments. Well, certainly what was said here, it was all right, and while the culture is a driver of economics and the most important factor of development of social capital, and trust and so on. But nevertheless, it seems to me very important not to forget that culture is an important segment of anthropology. And as such, it requires certain attention and protection, as well as there exist national parks and natural reserves. It seems to me that the trends of modern society, I would not go to comment it at length, well, they include a lot of anthropomorphic potential, economy and society developing in the way that society atomizes, while it sort of shrinks and the space of confidence narrows and the space for creativity disappears, well, as the most important human factor. And that is why culture, in this sense, has to be treated as some valuable but exhaustible result, which should and must be protected. And I think that the main notion here is creativity. Creativity and creative work, and we have to review it as an inexhaustible, as a finite resource, and to create conditions for it to be protected and preserved. As well as we take care of our nature, we have to take care of anthropological measures. And the second idea and thought I would like to express is, since we are talking about the economics and culture in relation to economics, I would introduce a notion of shadow culture, the way we, for instance, talk about shadow economy. Irina, I think, has touched upon this problem somewhat, though she didn't even expect maybe of talking about shadow economy. I think that Russian problem is that the richest cultural life is not well articulated. It is in shadow, in shade. For instance, talking about Krasnoyarsk, well, it's a fantastic space of Krasnoyarsk towers. Well, it's a Stolby sculpture, they call it. It's unique in the world, and we don't know about it because it exists inside Krasnoyarsk, but it is not well articulated as a resource. It is not beyond the shadow it is in. And huge masses of Russian culture, not well articulated. They are sort of in shade, they're shadow facilities. And if we speak about analogies of Rinaldo de Soto, we have to bring it back from the shade. And I like whatever is done in Moscow, very much so. But look, well, outstanding, great promenades, well-clad, looks very European, great. But garages, small garages are demolished. But I would remind you that garages in the whole world, it's a space for innovation and creativity. This is where people create ideas. And when we demolished those garages to build a beautiful well, allegedly public space, haven't we created some enclave of creative culture that would be just brought out of shade? That's what I would put it and finish it on this economic note. You know what? Alexander Auzan was talking about the peculiarities of national culture, which would restricting the resources. But now we're trapped by traditions. We did not give an opportunity of democratically build up this communication with the audience. Well, let's add 5 minutes. Do we have principally important questions from the audience, or do you reject your right? Well, okay. Who wants to ask a question? Well, if not, then I would like to say thank you to everybody, because it was very, well, well, I don't like this word shadow culture, because it is sort of linked to some illegal, illegitimate associations, unlawful. But you're right, absolutely right, because besides those Krasnoyarsk towers, there are so many other things. But the urban culture, the city culture, and a lot of great institutions, they are all on the map of our motherland. So though we don't have a cultural map. Just one example to quote, because indeed, #1 art museum was built up back in 1993 after the Soviet era, when an empty Lenin museum with the whole exposition was taken by two guys. They didn't touch any of the objects. They sort of embedded into the new context. And what they do, unbelievable number of activities, and we support them from the very inception of our fund. But unfortunately, is that we don't have this communicative space. They stay local, though their exhibitions can be well presented everywhere in the world. And I can provide you lots of lists. No, you are not capable of giving us lists now. Well, we know the Cannes Festival, and we supported them at their inception, and now they rolled out and became an international event. If we sum up those activities, we would see the creativity, which is unconscientious, not supported. And when we start talking as to what can we provide as the image of Russia but for the pregnant dolls, well, seemingly there's nothing to take. Well, there is the great creative country, not described, not taken out of the shade, of course, but into the media or mass media space. Thank you very much. I have to call it a day. Well, just to say a couple of words of what was already said. Kapkov started with the atmosphere of senses and social capital. Alexander Auzan was speaking about the problems of trust and cultural factors of development. Then happiness, heart, longer-term prospects, working longer-term, not pragmatic notions beyond a very narrow pragmatic circle, but this is how city or urban culture is built up. It's a field of opportunities. Needless to say, we need a map of city activities or the country activities, because we're unaware of very many things. Maybe not shadow culture, but the culture which is in the shade. Yes, we do have it. Thank you very much for this good conversation. I was very happy to interfere with your presentations, but we were pressed for time. Thank you.